Welcome to the Chapters of Grace podcast. You're probably wondering who this is. This is not Sarah and Heather. This is their husbands, and this is the dad takeover.
What's up?
And, my name is Gabe. I'm Sarah's husband, and that beautiful voice was Sean. That is Heather's husband. And yeah, we're just here taking over their podcast. We're about to take a break for Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's and all that. And they're going to be back at the beginning of the year. But we just decided that we're the ones that usually do the audio and social media. And we had the equipment, so we decided we would do a takeover.
So we kicked them out of the room.
We did. We kicked them out. They will be back. Don't worry. I'm sure you're definitely going to want them back after today. But but yeah, we're excited. We're going to be talking about some dad stuff and husband stuff, and it's going to be fun. So we have with us today a special guest. Not only do you have two new voices to listen to, you have three. So we have with us Bryce Miller. Bryce, it is great to have you with us today.
What's up? Glad I can be here. Thanks for having me.
Bryce is an incredible human being, and we love him very much. And he's got some awesome dad insights, awesome husband insights. So, guys, what are we talking about today?
I guess we can kick it off, kind of talking about like how many kids we got, kind of about a little bit about our kids. So I'll jump in and start. So of course, I'm sure you've already heard Heather talk about our two little girls. We have a 7-year-old and 3-year-old going on 30s.
Make sure you get the age right.
Yeah.
They're going to be listening.
I'm sitting over here like, okay, it's this. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I literally have a tattoo on my arm, and I still sometimes have like read my Roman numerals. So they're always fun. The little one's constantly likes to get in trouble. She gets her cuteness and tries to get away with things, which I can't say much. I did the same thing as a kid, so she gets it honest. And then of course the sweet little oldest one, she's the typical first child rule follower, and likes to do her thing and likes crafts and loves for me to do things with her. And I know we're going to talk about the dad stuff in a little bit, but yeah, that's about my kids.
Awesome. All right, Bryce, what about you?
Oh, yeah. So I've got 3 kids. We upgraded from 1 to 3 this year. So that's an adventure still. We've got a 2.5-year-old boy, and then we've got 6-month-old twin girls. And they're all fantastic. You know, we're going through it's not terrible twos. It really started late. But just where he has, with our son, our 2-year-old, he's decided that he's got an independent voice that needs to be heard. And he knows exactly what he wants to do, when he wants to do it. 95% of the time, that's drumming on everything, including his sisters. So we get a lot of abuse in the house. But yeah, so he's great, full of energy, and they are too. They're starting, they're 6 months, so we're starting to see our twins, their personalities. One of them's super chill, and they're both, all 3 kids are really smiley, but yeah, one twin's really chill and happy, goes with the flow. The other one is more vocal, we'll say, and she's very like 0 to 100. She's either really happy or she's letting you know that she's very unhappy. But they're super great, and it's fun to see. You guys have multiples too, so it's fun to see your older ones when a new child comes along, how they interact together. And like, our son loves to make the twins laugh, and he does stuff that makes them laugh harder than we can. My wife and I can make them laugh, so it's just fun to see. So we love it.
I will give a shout out though, when you upgraded from 1 to 3, you upgraded like to the awesomest dad car ever.
Oh yeah, like legit.
Like that's goals for your car. Like
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I always awe at it every time I get in it.
It's like very spaceship-esque.
Yeah. If you're wondering, we have a Kia Carnival, and we got the one with all the bells and whistles, and I'm gonna put some underglow and maybe
nice.
Some spinner rims or something. Yeah, it is a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, so I have, me and Sarah have 2 boys, almost 2 and almost 4. So yeah, they're a mess. They are, it's definitely, it's definitely crazy at our home most days. They're really getting into wrestling and actually like playing with each other. And which is, it's great to see because like I didn't really know if they would get to that level like as quick as they did because our oldest, he's pretty tall. But our youngest, he's grown very quickly. So they're actually almost the same height. And our youngest actually weighs 2 pounds more than our oldest. Wow. So he definitely gives him a run for his money. Good. And I love it. I had a younger brother and an older brother growing up. And it's just been so great to see them. I mean, they get on each other's nerves all the time, but they genuinely, like when I leave the house with one of them and then Sarah's at the house with the other, they genuinely like miss each other. And like when we get back, they run up and give each other a big hug and start playing. And it's really, I love it. I really didn't know what to expect having multiple kids. 'Cause me and my older brother is 10 years older than me, and my younger brother is 7 years younger. So it was just like, I mean, my boys are much closer. So it just didn't really know what to expect, and so it's been it's great. They're awesome. I love them.
So yeah, that's how it was with my older sister. So there's 5 years between us, but with my oldest and my youngest, there's 4 years. But I felt there's not as much of a gap there. And plus, I think it helps too when they're the same gender too. Like me and my sister, like there was that 5 years between us, and she was in high school and I was still in middle school, and the younger annoying little brother. So I was real curious how my two would interact with the younger one, but they get along the same way. They love each other when they get out of the house, and but they fight all the time too. Good grief. It's constant.
I love it. But I mean, the thing that's siblings. I mean, it's healthy. I think when it comes down to it, I think if they're like if my boys just completely separated and did their own thing, I don't think it wouldn't be good, you know. Yeah. That's why we try our best to because we actually just recently merged their rooms, so they are rooming together. It's still going. It's ongoing. But we did that, and then turned our youngest room. It was kind of like it was pretty much just made for a nursery anyway. It's a smaller room, so we turned that into a playroom. And it's I will say it's going very well. Sleep has been interesting. I will say that because our oldest is very, very particular about everything. Like the first night that we moved the rooms around, well, we didn't even put our youngest bed in there yet, but we just kind of moved a couple things around, and he melted down because there was a basket that is usually one place in the room, but was not anymore, and he melted down. So we were like, "Oh, what are we doing?" So we've had some interesting work where we've had to kind of work out the timing of it to where we put one to bed, give the other a little time, and once he's asleep, we put him in there. So and they both have to. We have a Amazon Echo in there. They both have to listen to different things while they're sleeping. So it's like crazy. Goodness. So we have to like turn one song off, turn another on, and yeah, it's a whole thing. But we've figured it out. We've worked it out, and I will say it's going well so far. And they've utilized their playroom a lot more, and toys are not all over our house, just all over the floor in that room.
You need to come teach my girls how to do that. Because they have a playroom and their separate bedrooms, and they still manage to get toys on every floor of my house.
Well, our living space is just, it's kind of a weird setup. And before we had their toys just like in the living room, kind of in this area, and it was just every day thrown everywhere, and it just wasn't working for us. So I mean, thankfully, thank the Lord that's worked, and that it could have gone a lot worse.
There you go.
So,
you got to sequester them sometimes.
Oh yeah,
just put them away.
I will until they get to the old enough too. They'll be in the bed, they want to sleep in each other's bed, like my two do now. On the weekends, they want to sleep in the bed together, and
that's 100%.
And all summer long, they want to share the bed. I'm like, all right, maybe we should do this every single night, because then when school starts back, although next year the youngest should hopefully be going to school. So That'll be interesting. They'll be fighting to go to sleep in the bed all school year. I'm like, no, not happening.
That's funny. I will say the one thing that has been nice is they've kind of synced up with waking up. So before it was like one got up way earlier than the other and the other like slept in, but they've kind of like hit there right in the middle. I mean, they still, I have to get up at like 5 a.m. every day just to get any kind of like morning routine done.
Just keeps
because
earlier and earlier.
yeah, oh yeah, because that's the way it was like before. Like my youngest was getting up at like 5. And so now, like, it's anywhere between 6:30 and 7:30 now. Yeah. So I can at least get a little bit, like, I can read my Bible and have my coffee and be, you know, like, awake by the time they're up wanting chocolate milk and, you know, whatever else in their special cup, like, you know.
All right. So one thing I wanted to talk about was you hear a lot of times you hear about mom guilt, and my wife used that term a lot. But like for me, I know like for dad guilt, to me that's another big thing that dads deal with. I know I deal with it personally, especially like because it's such an age gap between my girls. One's in school, one's not. My when the whole pandemic started, my daughter was only 8 months old. So, and we started working from home, and I've been working from home ever since then. So a lot of times I feel a little guilty because I feel like my oldest doesn't always get every little bit of attention, whereas my youngest, I see her all day, every day. And sometimes that can be hard. Like when they come home, I feel like I don't get enough time with my oldest, and she's at the age now where she starts to really kind of get impressionable, and she's starting to really like develop her opinions and her viewpoints of what a man should be and like what she should be looking for in a spouse one day. Like she starts developing those things at this age, I feel like. And that's why I try to be very conscious about that. But it's one of those things that's hard sometimes that you don't realize how much time you're spending away until you start thinking about doing it. And you're like, ugh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that right now. Maybe I should stop what I'm doing. Let's focus my attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a hard one. I definitely feel you there, and especially like you said with the pandemic, kind of like creating working from home situations and stuff like that. It just kind of throws things for a loop. I know my boys have grown up through it. You know, my oldest was I think about a year old when it happened, so he's still, you know, kind of didn't really. I think he got like maybe a couple months of daycare, but then like that entire time, besides going to church, he wasn't around like any other kids. So like it's definitely like that's definitely kind of thrown things for a loop. I mean, I don't work from home solely, but I do get a lot of freedom in my job. So it's, for me, it's hard because like there's things that I could do from home. But I do have an office that I go to, and some things are just easier to do in the office. You know, it's easier to focus. So I have a lot of guilt in like, it's stupid, but I have a lot of guilt in coming to work and doing my job. You know, I mean, it's just kind of that thing. Like I would love to be able to make the decision to stay home and be with the kids all day. But I just know sometimes like I'm only going to get a quarter of the work done. If that at all, because the thing is like, yeah, I can do some stuff from home, but like I want to play with the boys, you know. Yeah. Like I want to, like I see everything around the house that I haven't gotten done and that I need to do, and I'll end up doing it, you know, or just like stressing about it. So like, and then there are some things like I do go out and I coach. So like there's things that I don't have to be in the office for that I have to do. But even with that, most of the time that's in the evenings or like Saturday mornings. So I feel guilty then because that's the time where I legitimately should be with them. Yeah. So, you know, depending on what kind of job you have, it just kind of brings up its own facets to that. I would say that's one of my main struggles as a dad. Because like you said, like you don't really realize how much they're growing up and how many things they're like really paying attention to. Like our oldest, like I said, he's almost 4, but he's got an insane memory. Like it's crazy. Like he'll bring up he'll be like, Dad, don't you remember that day that we went and did this and that? And, you said this. And I'm like, dude, I don't remember what I said last week. Like, I legitimately don't remember that, like, barely. And you remember, like, great details about it. So it's just kind of like, really for me, one of the ways that I try to combat, the dad guilt is really just trying to go out of my way to be mindful about the things that I do, the time that I spend at home, or even just like I just recently took up skateboarding, and it's I can barely go straight on it, but my oldest is into skateboarding right now, so like I'm trying to utilize that as a time where we can, like, something special that we can do together, because like I'm learning as he's learning, so like I'm just trying to kind of like pick out those moments where I can be intentional. I think that's a really big part of overcoming that, is being intentional about the things that you're doing and saying. I mean, honestly.
That really too is like the big differentiator you see in, like, families that are healthy, and that doesn't mean everything's perfect. There's never any fighting or whatever. That's always going to happen in every family, but it's families that are growing together, and staying close, and you're seeing the values of the parents being instilled in the children. And, like for us sitting here, we're leading them towards the Lord, and we see our kids moving that direction, and you see, their manners and all those sorts of things. It's literally almost just the difference between you actually put intention into it or you don't. I mean, sometimes, and that's why I love, having a boy. It's really helpful because I love, I do woodworking, and I've got projects around the house that I'm building stuff for. So it's like, hey man, come outside. Like, I'll get a low level, like, we're not busting out the track saw and, cutting stuff up. But it's like, hey, I just got this little, like, finishing work to do. Why don't you come out? And he loves doing stuff like that. And he, I've got a electric sander and stuff that I'll run, and I'll let him do that and sand the boards and do the whole thing. And guys grow, like, that's the cool thing. Guys grow that way. Like, we grow doing stuff together. Now with the girls, it's going to be a different thing. That'll have to be like, what are you guys doing? Let me kind of jump into your world. Are you having a, stereotypical, like, tea party on the living room floor or something? Like, let's get into that. And we've talked about, my wife and I have talked about, having those date night kind of a things, and just having, like, set aside activity times, for us to spend with our kids individually, and, build that relationship with them individually, but also family things together. And you're right. It's Sean, you kind of mentioned a little bit, it's almost like you really have to choose what you want to do, because at any moment, there's about 3 or 4 competing things, and you really have to, even your marriage is a big thing too, that comes into play. And that's where I've really been focusing a lot of time, because we had twins earlier this year. And, so that's watching your wife go through the process of being pregnant and having a child and then raising that child is like, it's like Wonder, I call my wife Wonder Woman too. It's really is like Wonder Woman status, because it's a whole thing, what a woman's body can do. But even just seeing your wife, it's like they say, you see really what a person's made with when they go through tribulations or they go through difficult times. And just to see my wife come through that, and not that was a tribulation, but it's just it's a hard thing. It's a lot of work. Yeah. And to see her just perseverance in that, and her dedication, and her, selflessness in all that, in so many ways, in some ways that I will never be able to understand as a man. But anyways, all that to say, like it really, I get dad guilt for my wife too, husband guilt, because there's times where, I need a recharge, or I need something. We just took a family vacation in Florida, but you guys can relate, having young kids and then going on vacation. It's almost more work, because you're away from your normal environment at home, and you've got little kids that you're trying to accommodate, but also enjoy a new environment. And then, we took our oldest, we took them all to the aquarium in Florida. And it was like watching our 2-year-old run around, and he's like, it's like, hey, there's a huge shark over there. And he's like, oh, cool. And then he's like, what is that? Guppy, whatever. And it's like, dude, that's not the cool stuff. Like, look, here's a big sea turtle or something. And he's just like looking at the birds and he's running around and everything else. And it's kind of like you kind of balance there too. Like, what are your kids interested in? And let's kind of like jump into that with, like you mentioned with your oldest, Gabe. You mentioned with your oldest, skateboarding. Like, that's something that he's interested in and that you guys can kind of jump into together. And it's kind of stuff like that. And it really, it makes me think about how my parents were with me, and even just remembering as a kid, like going through the growing up experience. And it's like, what did I need as a kid? Because our oldest is me as a child. And that's what I was, one question I have for you guys was like, do you feel sometimes like you're raising yourself as a kid?
100%.
Because there's all
100%.
the times where Blair will see something and I'll be like, yeah, that was me as a kid. So I know how to handle this.
Yeah.
So I got you.
My youngest is me.
Yeah.
My oldest is a little bit, but my youngest is definitely me. I was a second child. She's a second child. She, more than curly hair, is the only thing she got from me.
Yeah, same. My youngest, I was there is a lot of stories about me as a child that are pretty rough. And over the years, I'll be honest, I kind of like let it get to me. Like as I've gotten older and as I've like had him, I'm like, come on, man. Like it's me. Like that's what the stories are about, and I just feel like, it's God just kind of laughing like, hey, give your parents a little credit. I love my parents. I don't hold anything against them. Cause I was raised differently. My dad was an evangelist. He was a clown, and our family did literally
not just calling him a clown.
Yeah, literally a 7-foot tall clown. And we would go to different churches across the United States and do service, like week-long services. And I was stuck in a van most of the time. I literally grew up in a van and in hotel rooms. My wife jokes that like I'm more comfortable in a hotel room than I am like at home. And I love a good hotel room. It's the best. And Cracker Barrel. I feel so at home at Cracker Barrel. It's literally, it's pathetic.
That's funny.
Yeah, but it's just that's the way I was raised, and it was just a different way to grow up, and so I see so much in my son of Sarah was joking with me because she was at Target and saw something that he wanted and just like completely melted down, like laid on the floor, everything. And like that's like one of the stories my mom tells is me, laying on the floor, like hitting my head on the floor, like, just freaking out about something in Walmart. And when she's telling me, I was like, yep, that one's me. So, but the thing is, like, I also have to, like, I've had to work on myself and kind of combat like anger issues and, ADHD and different things like that. And so like, it kind of like helps me know how to love him and how to pour into him. Mm-hmm. And, just kind of like, cause I don't want him to grow up with stories of how crazy he was, Yeah. So that's just, it's so funny how you can see yourself in your kids. It's crazy.
Yeah. Even my oldest too. Like there's times that I say my youngest resembles a lot of my characters. My oldest is the same thing too. Like she gets hyper focused on stuff, and I was telling Bryce earlier, like there's times that I get hyper focused on a project, and my wife has to remind me ever so gently, just like, you're hyper focusing on something right now. Because I'll easily, like a Saturday, I'll spend a whole Saturday working on a project. At the end of the day, you're like, where did the day go? Like, and then I feel guilty
Oh, yeah.
for not doing it, even though it was stuff that needed to be done, and sometimes I have to remind my oldest she wants to do something, and it's something her mom wants me to make, and I'm like, well, mommy wants me to do something for her right now. I'm trying to make something she wants. I'm trying to put her first, and then but you still felt that guilt, and I think that's one thing the enemy tries to do sometimes. He tries to take away your value and make you feel like you're worthless because you didn't spend all the time, even though you're doing things that your spouse may want, or things for work, or things that you need to do around the house to keep your house running. And I think it's a easy trick for him. Like, oh, well, I can make you feel guilty for it, so that you feel, even though you weren't necessarily doing anything wrong, I'm gonna make you feel guilty for it, so that he can take away your value as a husband, as a leader of your home.
Oh, yeah.
100%. That's a big one with me, and I gotta be honest, I'm still kind of like working through it. Is like, I have so many, like we all have so many like little projects that could be done and need to be done, but like my garage, I really need to organize it, clean it out. I did some of it recently, but I know in my mind that it's one of those projects that like I need to just like really like dig in, pull everything out, put the shelves up, reorganize it. Like it's a whole thing. But in the back of my mind, I know like Sarah's going to have to deal with the boys that entire time that I'm doing that. And it's also time that I'm just not going to be with them. Yeah. So I just like, that's really hard for me. That's a really hard thing for me to overcome. And sometimes I'll just like when we were putting up Christmas decorations, I was able to have the boys with me.
Yeah.
Sarah had them for a little while when I was outside. It was kind of like a hybrid thing of that. So I was able to kind of push past it, but just like, even though I'm doing something like for Sarah,
yeah,
I know that it's hard on her for me not to be in there with it. So it's it's a weird thing to be in the middle of, and that's a hard thing to get past.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there's so many times that I've done that, and I realize and then you feel terrible for it sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, it's like I was talking to a buddy down in Florida while we were there, and I think it's just like you said, Sean. It's just the enemy trying to put thoughts into your mind, because they have a young son who's a toddler, and not to get any kind of a realm. We're not getting into any opinion about this, but they've had their son vaccinated, and they've updated his vaccinations and all those sorts of things. Just that's what they felt the right thing was to do. Yeah. But then, there's some folks in his family that say things about that, and they're like, oh, what about autism? And they start trying to point these things out, and then, he feels guilty about that. And I'm like, man, that's the thing about it, because he, deals with the same thing. Like, he works long hours to provide for his family. Yeah. And so he has like this huge dad guilt, because now it's like, oh, did a decision I made for my son, like potentially affect him? And it's like, we've talked to them about different things, and like, listen, like, don't let this get your head all wrapped around and everything. Because also the other part of it is like, there's no evidence to show like autism or any of this is actually even happening. Yeah. It's just kind of like people have been saying things and trying to put those thoughts out there. And so I said, but yeah, it's definitely a huge thing, because now, you're thinking like every single decision that I make as a parent is the determiner, the determination of how they turn out. And you hear stories all the time, like, especially with, our generation, where they're like digging way back, and they're like, oh, the reason that I like have a funny tic that I just got a year ago is because when I was like 4 years old, this thing happened to me. And we try to like itemize our entire childhood into this whole like, oh, the reason that, number one, we try to make things that are just like personality traits and just the way human beings are. Like, if you look at people, we're all so different. And, like you said with Heather, Sean, like, Blair's figuring out a lot of things about me, but the more that she learns, she's like, oh, okay, you're this way. Like, so I know, with projects or whatever, like, he's going to get this kind of a way. So if I start to recognize it and we need to segue over, we need to pivot, she knows how to address that. But it's just that thing, like, we try to label we try to find ways to make ourselves bad people. And it's like, that's just being human, man.
Yeah.
Hey, babe.
Me and Sean and Bryce recorded an episode of your podcast.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago.
An episode for the podcast?
Yeah. We're calling it the Dad Takeover, I think, because the dads are like taking over from you guys. So yeah.
Okay, when are you releasing the Dad Takeover?
Well, this is actually the outro for the episode. It's coming out at like 6 a.m. tomorrow.
I'm calling Heather.
Thank you for listening to the Chapters of Grace podcast. We hope you have enjoyed it. And if I'm still alive, we'll be back for another episode next week. Bye.
When I'm not talking, so I'm not like breathing in the microphone.
Hey guys, welcome to the Holiday Inn. Got some great selection of tunes for you guys tonight.
Let's wait for some nice blooper reels.
Yeah, that's right. Got Donnie T on the bass. And then, of course, Mike is here. I'm playing the keys for you tonight. Y'all just settle in. Gonna be here for a while.
Awesome.